President Franklin Delano Roosevelt once said that nothing happens in the political or in politics that is not determined and planned behind the scenes. Did he really mean what he said? If he did, does this mean that the Civil War between the states was planned? If so, for what purpose? Was there some long-range purpose which the general public was not supposed to know? Does this mean that the banking panic of 1907 was planned for some ulterior motive? Does this mean that the Federal Reserve System was planned in advance to be hoisted upon the shoulders of the American people, which is a private banking monopoly answerable to no one, not even Congress, not the President, no, not even the American people? Does this mean that there was a plan to create money by bankers out of thin air and charge interest to the government and the American people? Does that mean that every cent that goes into circulation draws interest for someone but not the government of the United States or any of its agencies? Was there some bizarre plot to undermine the stability of the American currency by causing inflation? If so, why? Who is behind it? Events of the 18th, 19th, and the incredible events of the 20th century, bringing us right into the 21st century, are very bizarre and need to be understood in their true light. If President Roosevelt's statement was correct, does this mean that World Wars I and II were planned in advance to involve the United States of America in working toward the long-term planned world government? Does this mean that the Great Depression of the 1930s was created to further some planned goal by those who are working for world government according to Revelation 13? Does this also mean that the formation of the League of Nations after World War I was planned for some purpose hidden from view from the American people, and it was planned by very sinister people? Does this also mean that the United States was planned in advance to fulfill the League of Nations and to become a part of it, but the failure of it brought about the United Nations after World War II? If President Roosevelt's statement was correct, everything in the political is determined in advance, does this also mean that someone planned the overthrow of the Tsar of Russia? That would be political. Does that mean that the establishment of international communism as a seen enemy of the West was planned in advance for some great purpose that most Americans do not understand, that will fulfill Bible prophecy? Does this mean that the treaty which ended World War II was designed to turn 11 sovereign nations with a combined population of over 100 million people over to the communists? That would be political if it were true. If President Roosevelt's statement was true, that nothing happens in the political that is not pre-planned, does this mean that the formation of the United Nations was designed to be an absolute assault upon the Constitution of the United States and upon our national sovereignty? That would be political. Does this also mean that the Korean War was a design for political purposes that has been hidden from the American people? That also would be political. If President Roosevelt's statement was correct that nothing happens in the political that is not pre-planned, does this mean that the assassination of President John F. Kennedy was planned for political reasons? Does this also mean that the Vietnam War was planned by Lyndon Johnson and others behind the scene, politicians, the industrial military complex, for purposes only known to them and not to the American people? Does his statement also mean that loyal United States ally, nationalist China, was expelled from the United Nations and communist China was seated because it was planned in advance? That would be political. Does this also mean that the October surprise of October 18th, 19th of the year 1980 by former CIA director, former board of directors of the Marxist Council on Foreign Relations and Trilateral Commission, member of Yale University's Skull and Bones Secret Society, and member of the Bohemian Grove, former President George Bush, to create a coup d'etat to overthrow the American government as planned in advance. That would be political. Does that mean that the Justice Department of the United States will no longer seek justice for the American people, but rather hide the dirty work of those who have usurped the legitimate government in Washington, D.C. of the United States? That would be political. Does this also mean that former President George Bush did not even try to win the 1992 election for the presidency of the United States to assure that Bill Clinton would become president in the 1990s? After all, everyone knows that Bill Clinton went behind the Iron Curtain when he was a Rhodes Scholar in London, England, and did business for the communists. What business did he do? This would be political. It would be planned in advance. Could it be that the presidential elections of the year 2000 were designed to create a crisis which those in politics behind the scenes deemed necessary to accomplish another coup d'etat, to make sure they were in total control of the government of the United States by the same people? After all, standing on the stage with now President George W. Bush were the same people that backed his father back in the 1980s when he became president into the early 90s. Could it be that the overthrow of the political process in America has been accomplished? This would be political. Does this mean that it does not matter who becomes president because both parties are under the control of powerful people behind the scenes? What does history bear out on this subject? Is the book of Revelation, chapter 13, jumping off the pages of your television, off the newspaper? What is happening in America? I'll repeat once again what President Franklin Delano Roosevelt said. He said that nothing happens in the political unless it's planned in advance. What did he mean? And did he know that for a fact? President Roosevelt wrote a letter to an associate dated November 21st, 1933, and I quote from the book FDR, His Personal Letters, page 373. The real truth of the matter is, as you and I know, that a financial element in the large centers has owned the government ever since the days of Andrew Jackson, end of quote. There was another man that even predates President Roosevelt from England. His name was Benjamin Disraeli. In 1844, Benjamin Disraeli, England's famed statesman, published a novel entitled Coningsby. In it he wrote, and I quote, "The world is governed by far different personages from what is imagined by those that are not behind the scenes," end of quote. Felix Frankfurter, who was a justice of the United States Supreme Court, stated practically the same thing as Disraeli when he said, and I quote, "The real rulers in Washington are invisible and exercise power from behind the scenes," end of quote. From Curtis Dahl's book FDR, My Exploited Father-in-Law, page 67. Also, the mayor of New York, John F. Hyland, on March 26, 1922, said in a speech, and I quote, "The real menace of our republic is the invisible government which, like a giant octopus, sprawls its slimy length over our city, state, and nation. At the head is a small group of banking houses, generally referred to as international bankers. This little coterie of powerful international bankers virtually run our government for their own selfish ends," end of quote. Don Bell's article, who are our rulers, from the American Mercury magazine, September 1960, page 136. These men that I've quoted from were very influential. They were very knowledgeable of the political scene of their day. Could their words be true, that there is someone that runs the government behind the scenes that are manipulating the political? And can you prove it? And for what purpose? And does it fulfill Revelation chapter 13, verse 1, that a government is rising to rule the whole world? And that it will fulfill Revelation 13, verse 2, that Satan, the devil, who likes to be called Lucifer, is giving power to these individuals? And will it fulfill Revelation chapter 13, verse 7, where it says eventually this government will make war with the saints and overcome them, and there will be massive martyrdom of Christians the world over? Yes, in the United States of America. There's one fact of which we can be assured. The Order of the Illuminati was founded on May 1st, 1776 by a Dr. Adam Weishaupt, who had been trained for 5 years by a very secretive person who was jointly members of the Priory of Sion, the French revolutionary apparatus, and also the Knights Templars, who merged at the very highest level in secret and trained Dr. Adam Weishaupt to found the Illuminati. He was a professor of canon law at the University of Ingolstadt, Bavarian, Germany. That can be found in the Encyclopedia Britannica under the article Illuminati. Weishaupt happened to be born a Jew, and he converted to Roman Catholicism. He was a former Jesuit priest who said that he broke with that order and he hated all forms of religion. It's important that we clarify the real meaning of the name of Weishaupt's secret society, the Illuminati. The name implies that those individuals who are members of the Illuminati are the only members of the human race who are truly enlightened spiritually by this person called Lucifer on how to govern, how to educate, how to rule the world. Weishaupt and his followers consider themselves to be the cream of the intelligentsia on the European continent, the only people with the mental capacity and the knowledge, the insight and understanding that is necessary to govern the entirety of the world and ultimately bring it peace. Their avowed purpose and goal was the establishment of a novus ordo seclorum, and those words are on the very back of every $1 bill that is printed in America. And it means a new world order or a secular world order. The name Illuminati is derived from the word Lucifer, which means bearer of the light or spirit being of extraordinary brilliance. He's discussed in Isaiah 14:12 how that he fell, and he took, according to Revelation 12, verse 1 through 4, 1/3 of God's loyal angels in rebellion against him. This is the invisible power giving rise to this end-time social system that I referred to in Revelation 13, verse 2. It said the dragon would give power, and it is through high Freemasonry called the Illuminati. Public attention was first drawn to the existence of the Illuminati and their diabolical plan for world conquest as a result of a death in 1785. History records that a courier for the Illuminati by the name of Lanz was racing on horseback from Frankfurt, Germany to Paris, France. He was carrying documents that were sewed inside of his jacket relating to Illuminati activities in general and specific instructions for the planned French Revolution of 1789. The documents originated with Jewish members of the Illuminati in Germany who had given up on God totally and were addressed to the Grand Master of the Grand Orient Masons in Paris, France. This is one of the most powerful Freemasonic organizations around the world. In Paris, France, the Grand Orient Lodge. As the courier galloped through Ratisbon, or Ratisbon, which is today called Regensburg, it was claimed that it was struck by lightning. However, that is disputed. Some think that it was deliberately killed so that it would frame Adam Weishaupt and his assistant von Nigi would take over the Illuminati under a different name and continue it. All the papers that he was carrying fell into the hands of the local police, who turned them over to the Bavarian government in Germany. The authorities ordered the police to raid the headquarters of the Illuminati. This resulted in additional documents being captured. These documents reveal that the conspirators of the Masonic Lodge, the Grand Orient Lodge, had worldwide intentions. All of the carefully documented evidence was brought to the attention of the governments of Britain, Germany, Austria, France, Poland, and Russia. For one reason or another, possibly inside Illuminati infiltration, these governments chose to turn a deaf ear to the warnings contained in these dreadful documents concerning the French Revolution as the beginning of world conquest. 4 years later, the French Revolution exploded on the European scene in all of its hideous fury. Sir Walter Scott, in the second volume of his The Life of Napoleon, points out that the events leading up to the French Revolution were all created by the money barons, the Illuminati, whose agents then led mobs in creating the famous Reign of Terror, which killed 1/3 of the population of France. 2 books, if they can still be found, even shed further light on this period. One is entitled The French Revolution by Nesta Webster. The other, Pawns in the Game by William Guy Carr. According to those books and other documents, all initiates were required to take an oath to bind themselves, quote, to perpetual silence and unshakable loyalty and submission to the order in the persons of my superiors, here making a faithful and complete surrender of my private judgment, my own will, and my narrow-minded employment of my own power and influence. I'll interrupt there for a moment so you can see that when they joined this, they pledged that they would give up every thought process and blindly follow the leaders who were under Satan the devil or Lucifer's influence. They went on to say in this oath that they took, I pledge myself to account the good of the order as my own, and am ready to serve it with my influence, my fortune, my honor, and my blood. The friends and enemies of the order shall be my friends and my enemies. And with respect to both, I will conduct myself as directed by the order. I'll interject once again. It shows that they took orders directly from their superior above them, and whatever those orders were, they did them without question. And it was to advance the cause toward world government that would one day be achieved. They went on to say in this oath that they would devote themselves to its increase and promotion, and therein to employ all my ability without secret reservations. End of quote. That came directly from the book by John Robeson, Proofs of a Conspiracy, who wrote it in 1798, and it was personally handed by Adam Weishaupt, all the information relating to this conspiracy in hopes that Robeson would join him. That was page 71 of that book. By way of warning as to the consequences of betraying the order, the initiate took part in a ceremony which he was warned that, quote, if you're only a traitor and perjurer, in other words, if you've lied about the oath you're taking, Learn that all brothers are called upon to arm themselves against you. Do not hope to escape or to find a place of safety. Wherever you are, shame, remorse, and the rage of our brothers will pursue you and torment you to the innermost recess of your entrails. End of quote. That was from the book World Revolution by Nesta Webster, published in London, England in 1921, page 14. So we can see from the things discussed today, there was an organization inspired by Lucifer or Satan the devil. Their job was to begin to develop world government. They were to take over all the Freemasonic houses all over the world, better known as the lodges, at the very highest levels, so the lesser brethren, as they're called, would not even understand what was happening to them.